The topic of this week is an interesting one. And that is, I made a lot of arrows in this little packet, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty finding things. The first arrow is in the Chumash. Let's read the pasuk immediately, okay? Hashem God Almighty says to Moshe Rabbeinu. Leimer means he should repeat to the Jewish people. Thank you. What can he tell them? David al-Aaron, speak to Aaron, Leimer, that he should tell others, Ish mizarcha, any person from your descendants, the generation for all future generations, Asher yiyeh mum, that will be blemished, handicapped, physically deficient. Lo yikrav should not come close, lahakriv, to offer up lechem elokov, the bread of Hashem. A kohen, there's two separate sets of halachas, both of which are found in Parshas Hameir. As you probably discovered, the Parsha in Chumash, which deals most predominantly with the halachas of Kuhuna, is this week, the laws of the priests, of Kohanim. You have halachas of Kuhuna in other places. You have the Chavdal of Matnas Kuhuna in Sof Parshas Koirach. But the halachas of how a Kohen is supposed to behave, for the most part, are in Parshas Emer. And the two halachas, of course, are that an animal that is a balmum, an animal that is blemished in some way, is not allowed to be used as a korban. And a kohen, a priest, that has a mum, is not allowed to do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. And of course the question is why? If a person is handicapped, what's wrong with him? Why does that disqualify him from doing the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash? I chose this topic because it's a little bit obscure, but as you explored, you discovered, like in everything else in data, it's a whole world with different interpretations and different types of interpretations and so on. Many years ago, when I was a young lad, I knew a man who was a polio victim, and he was in a wheelchair. And he was one of those people who had life figured out, and he was always available to explain to you how he had dealt with his polio. And he would talk about the fact that when he was a young boy, and after he had polio, and when he recovered, he had two choices. The choices were to walk around with crutches, stilts, or to sit in a wheelchair. And he chose the wheelchair. Most of his friends in similar positions chose the crutches, he chose the wheelchair. And he had a whole philosophy. And the essence of his philosophy was that, let's put it in simple words, there's nothing wrong with being handicapped. So why should he struggle and try and be as little invalid as possible? Let him convenience himself. He had a philosophy which he created as a child, which is rather profound. It amounts to every person has different expectation. As long as you meet your own expectation, you've achieved 100%. This is the whole idea that a handicap is not a handicap. It's just a different state of health. That was his philosophy. And it worked. For him it worked. But if that were the case, there wouldn't be the halacha for a balmum. A person who's handicapped is not handicapped. He has this different expectation. The fact of the matter was, a kohen who was handicapped even in minor ways, like a bulbous nose, or didn't have eyelashes, or his eyes were too close together, or his eyes were set too far back on his head, or his ears were too small, or his ears were large, couldn't do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. It doesn't seem fair. It's not PC. It's not politically correct. It's not.
EO.
What does that mean?
Equal employment opportunities.
No, you've got it wrong. It's not equal opportunity.
Equal employment opportunities.
It's equal employment results. Exactly. In the olden days, they said opportunity. We've gotten even more enlightened. But in any case, I don't want to be silly, but that takafashkein, it's difficult enough to understand why the Eibishter makes people with challenges. But why is the halacha that a person with a balmum cannot do Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash? Because the fact of the matter is, especially if he's born invalid, it's not his choice. Now, a couple of commentaries. Number one, the halacha in Bechas Kohanim. Anybody here a kohen? Not one kohen in the group? There's a halacha in Bechas Kohanim that says that a kohen who's balmum, a kohen who's invalid, is not allowed to do, unless people know him well. Because if people know him well, they're not going to look at him, not going to stare at him. If he's a stranger, people are going to stare at him, so he's not allowed to do the duchening.
You don't look at the Kohen Harav anyways.
That's the same a minig. Api halacha, you don't have to use a talus, you just don't look at the Kohen. But if he's a balmum, you will look at the Kohen. So when it comes to duchening, we say that it's not the invalid's problem, it's our staring at the invalid's problem. But that doesn't work in the Beis HaMikdash. That only works for duchening today. In the Beis HaMikdash, a Kohen who was an invalid was not allowed to come, not allowed to do the Avodah. And the question is why? It's a little bit simplistic to say, what did he do wrong? It's not his fault. But nevertheless, what is the Taram HaMitzvah? What is the reason for this din, for this halacha, that a person who's a balmum must not do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash? And of course, as we always do, we're going to have a number of different, in effect, levels of explanations. We're going to have a Rashi. We're going to have a Rambam that's then supported by Sefer HaChinuch. We're going to have a beautiful, very interesting Ramban and a Klei Yakar. And you'll see the Shita and a lot of the ideas that I've discussed in earlier classes, you're going to see them recurring, and you'll see how the Rishonim think. But of course, the end is going to be the Chassidus. And the Chassidus is God Eich. Chassidus, after you learn the earlier interpretations, you appreciate to a greater extent what Chassidus adds to the equation. So let's begin with Rashi. You got an arrow on your first page. On the bottom, the left, Ki kol ish asher boi mum loy yikrav. Any person who has a blemish should not approach to the way of the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi very pashut. And it's not appropriate that he should approach. Kamei, as it's written in the pasuk, hakivehu no lepechasecha. It's the first half of a pasuk. And it actually doesn't even say goymer, which some would argue is problematic. Hakivehu no lepechasecha. If you bring Hashem a korban from pochus, from the cheapest and the least and the most deficient, the pasuk continues, but Hashem be satisfied. It's not appropriate. You're giving Hashem a gift. You want to give it from the best. Rashi argues, just as bringing a blemished animal would be a from past, it would be a lack of generosity, a person who's blemished is also not appropriate. He should be a servant of Hashem. This is Rashi's pshat. Now, on the level of Shutei Shel Mikra, that's satisfactory, it's sufficient. On the level of Rashi to a 5-year-old child, a 5-year-old child can understand that someone who is handsome and whole is more ideal than somebody who's deficient. You could say, you can go back to that question. What did that person do? He's not liable. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't do any Avodah. If the person became wounded during his lifetime, so you can sort of say, well, he carries. The person was born, got to the invalid. What crime did he commit that disqualifies him to do the Beis HaMikdash? Rashi says he didn't do any crime. It's still pas. It's still less than ideal. This is Rashi's pshat. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to read the Rambam, and then we're going to read the Sefer HaChinuch, because although the Chinuch is after the Ramban, but it seems that the Rambam and the Chinuch go in the same shita, and I'll talk about it momentarily. Good evening, hello. So everybody turn till the end, after the Chumash. The Chumash is quite a few pages. After the Chumash, you have Meir HaNevuchim. I made an arrow. That's right, this page right here. When you finish the Chumash, you have one page of Meir HaNevuchim. This is Meir HaNevuchim, Chele Gimel, that means section 3, paragraph 45, Perek Mem Hey. I just want to say, B'kitza Nimrod, and I'm going to get back to this later, God will help. Rambam's philosophy book, the Sefer HaMoireh, gets very, very involved and very, very philosophical, very, very into Aristotelian reasoning. But the Chele Gimel, the third section of Meir HaNevuchim, is relatively speaking very easy to read. It's much more, it deals with the fundamental issues. Free will, bad things happening to good people, tests, divine providence, and the bulk of section 3 of Meir HaNevuchim is Taimei HaMitzvahs. Rambam gives reasons for basically all the mitzvahs. And he divides them up into 14 categories, and Perek Mem Hey deals with all the laws about the Beis HaMikdash. And you see where I made the arrow? And the Rambam gives a logical answer. The Rambam has the question, why is a person who's invalid unfit to do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash? What did he do wrong? And the Rambam says he didn't do anything wrong. But there's a problem anyway. And that is, if you don't mind, help him with the place, yeah? Says Rambam like this. V'shalai yishamish ba'avodah balmum. A person who is invalid, who's wounded, blemished, should not do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. And he adds, and this is also the halacha, v'lei balmum bilvad, not only one who is an invalid, el afa kiyurim. A person who's perfectly whole and healthy, but he's kiyur. Kiyur means unattractive for a variety of reasons. There's bad breath, that's perpetual, that's chronic, or even if he's involved in lowly work. If a kohen spends his life with menorah, forgive me, if he makes a living selling fertilizer, it's not appropriate to come to the Beis HaMikdash. He's perfectly healthy, he can wash himself and clean himself. There's 4 halachas of kiyur in Rambam, that if a person's business and occupation is not honorable, he shouldn't do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. Commission is by Bedina Mitzvah, as discussed in the laws of this mitzvah. Lafi. Now, what's the reason? Why would a person who's a balmum, in many cases he was born that way, be unfit in the Beis HaMikdash? So the Rambam says like this: She'ein ha'adam, a person will not be mechubed eitzel ha'hamoin, honored by the populace, v'tzurasei ha'amitis, in his true form, ela b'shleimus eivarav, if his body, if his limbs are whole, v'yehi b'godav, and his garments are beautiful. The Rambam says like this: you know why a balmum could do the Beis HaMikdash? God doesn't have a problem with him, but God knows that people will. It's human nature that if you see a cripple, it affects how you judge that person. Now, of course, it's unfair, but it is human nature. When you see a person that's healthy and whole and attractive and beautiful, you assume more of that person than you would assume of a person who's not healthy and whole. Now, in fact, the person may be gorgeous and be a dumbbell. The person may be a cripple and be able to see and brilliant. But the perception of people is that when somebody looks beautiful, we give them more honor. And then Rambam says the following words: the intent of Hashem is that the exaltedness, the honor that should be shown this home and its servants should be Eitzal HaKoil, for all of civilization, of all of mankind. I mean to say like this: from a technical point of view, a person who's an invalid has done nothing wrong, and his disqualification for doing the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash is not because he did not Avodah, because anything wrong with him. The perception of people is that a person who's not perfect in his physique, people judge him in a compromised way. The Eibishter wants the honor that people bestow on the Beis HaMikdash to be perfect. For the honor people bestow on the Beis HaMikdash to be perfect, you have to make the Beis HaMikdash as beautiful in the eyes of the beholder as possible. So the Rambam is saying, not like a Rashi, who said, Techa Secha, it's less than honorable. The Rambam is saying, it's less than perceived honor. Now, if you wanted to add Hasidus to this Rambam, Hasidus would say that the true measure of inner beauty is outer beauty. And if the inner beauty does not manifest outward, it's deficient, right? One of the most beautiful concepts in Hasidus, there's a Maimer in Ayin Ches, Va'ata Yigdo, where the Rebbe Rashab asks a familiar question. In Eishes Chayil it says, I'm sorry, Sheker HaChein V'Hevel HaYefi. Sheker HaChein means, Chein, which essentially means, it's translated, Chein is translated as vanity. Good evening, hello. Vanity is false. V'Hevel HaYefi, and beauty is substanceless, right? Chein is translated as vanity, but I'm going to translate Chein as charm, as grace, as appeal. Some people have Chein, they have a magnetism. So the Prophet says, Sheker HaChein. A grace or an attractiveness is a lie. Then the Rebbe Rashab says, Moshe says to Hashem, Va'ata no matzasi Chein. Behold, if I have found Chein, if I have found grace in your eyes, so then Moshe Rabbeinu says, teach me your ways, and then personally the Jewish people, and then ultimately Moshe says, I'd like to see your countenance. So the Rebbe Rashab says, is Chein good or bad? In the Eishes Chayil, it says sheker achein, that an appeal or a charm is a lie. So why is Moshe Rabbeinu saying to the Eibishter Matzah if it's false? So Chassidus is a very simple answer. Chen is exactly that. It's an external appeal. Some people have a magnitude, have an aura that just people are drawn to them. If a person has chen and is empty, is full of it, is a hollow person, sheker achein. The vanity, the grace, and the charm is not only false, but it enhances the lie. The external beauty allows the person to get away with being even more sheker. But if a person is beautiful on the inside, then the eternal appeal makes them more beautiful. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Va'atem no matzah." The inside certainly in Moshe Rabbeinu is ideal. But if that insight manifests with an external chen, then Haydeni Nasterachach. And this is, so to speak, a deeper interpretation of the Rambam's words. Rambam says, invalid, unqualified Yehuda Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash because of the perception. It's not that the perception alone matters, but the perception enhances the inner integrity. And the deficiency in the perception is considered a flaw. Rambam says the Eibishter still wants everybody to think the Beis HaMikdash is beautiful. So we're not blaming the invalid. But the fact is, this deficiency in external appeal, even if the inside is beautiful, takes away from the way people are going to perceive the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash. What the Rambam does is, he's not saying that invalid is doing anything wrong, and he's also not saying that Hashem has a problem with the invalid. It's not Hashem's problem. It's people's problem. And since Torah was given to people, Beis HaMikdash was given to people, so in anticipating the way people are going to perceive, the halachas of Balmum apply. This is the Rambam. Now, the Sefer HaChinuch, for those who are not familiar with Sefer HaChinuch was written a while after Rambam, maybe 100 years later, also by Arishan. And the Sefer HaChinuch essentially was 100%, minus one time, loyal to Rambam. Rambam wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs. Sefer HaChinuch was an identical book, same mitzvahs, with the exception of one. But he changed it, Sefer HaChinuch did. Because Rambam restructured Torah. Rambam was one of the most creative Jews who ever lived. He rewrote the Torah in his personal form. And the 613 mitzvahs follow an order that's unique to Rambam. Sefer HaChinuch took the 613 mitzvahs that the Rambam already wrote, but we wrote them according to the order of the Pashas. So the same mitzvahs, but he just rearranged them. Additionally, he gives timing on mitzvahs. The Sefer HaChinuch gives reasons for mitzvahs. Now, if you pay attention, you'll notice that the Sefer HaChinuch's reasons for mitzvahs are also Rambam's. So let's do the Chinuch now, because it's essentially, just turn the page, it's a more elaborate form of what we just read in Rambam. You see, the page looks like this. And I made an arrow, and at the bottom I underlined the two words, Misharoshe HaMitzvah. We don't have sufficient time to do all of it, but we'll do a little bit of it. Okay, now to read the Sefer HaChinuch, you'll see that he's saying essentially the same thing. Misharoshe HaMitzvah. One of the roots, one of the reasons for the mitzvah that an invalid cannot do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, so they're here like this. He just explains the Rambam better, and in his own words. Most of the activities of man, the tzuyes, will be appreciated by those who perceive them and see them based on the prominence of the people who are doing it. In other words, two people do the same activity. One is an unknown and the other is a prominent man. Because a prominent person does something, who does affect how valued and appreciated it is. It's human nature. See, I'm sorry? Two people do something. The same thing. But one guy's a big macher, and the other guy's a nobody. When the big macher does it, you can be more impressed. Because that's the way people are. Who does affect the value of what was done, how you perceive it?
But this is all, totally against what Yiddishkeit is all about. Yiddishkeit is all-inclusive, and fakert, a person who is an invalid is honored more, especially if his inside is beautiful. Here we say completely opposite. Completely the opposite of what Yiddishkeit is all about. Well, it doesn't look so good that he's doing the mitzvah because people will perceive it a certain way. So maybe the better guy, the better looking, the non-invalid should do it. This is totally against everything.
I don't think so.
Hold
What about Morris
Sani? Wait a second. Hold on. Let me finish my point. My point is that Yiddishkeit is just the opposite of what we're trying to impress upon over here. So,
That's why I gave you.
I cannot. I don't want to say I cannot accept that, but I can.
I have a problem with it.
I have a big problem with it because Yiddishkeit is totally the opposite, at least from what I understand. Then some people say, well, he's an invalid. No good. I'm sorry. And for people to do that is one thing, but for Hashem to say that because people do that, I'll go along with it, is like throwing fat on the fire.
Okay, let's leave the question stand. Okay, let's make the question a rhetorical one, a resounding question. In other words, instead of arguing about it, let's remember that there are going to be different reasons. That's the whole beauty of this class, is that we don't give one reason, we give various reasons, so that if you find fault with one reason, you go on to the other reason. What I explained to you before, I think is very true.
Mama's is a different thing.
What's the difference? What's the difference?
The difference I explained.
It's not his fault.
Hold it. Not his fault, but here's the difference. First of all, La Yovei Mamzer V'Kal Hashem. That's Midarai. La Yovei Mamzer V'Kal Hashem. Doesn't say La Yovei Invalid V'Kal Hashem.
No, his essence.
Okay.
His essence.
No, but it's different. No, but it's different. First of all, and besides that, the invalid could be a Torah, Oived Hashem, etc. He's an invalid.
Rabbi Say, if you don't mind me being honest with you, I'm always fighting with the clock. I do have that limitation, and sometimes when I don't have answers to questions, I use the clock as my excuse for not answering them. But I think, at least to some extent, what I said to you before about Chaim helps understand it. If it's only external beauty, you're right. But if the external beauty supports inner beauty, the beauty does have an effect.
Fine, but if we're saying if the invalid is a Ben Torah, is Oived Hashem, and his only claim to fame, if you will, is the fact that he's an invalid.
Right.
How can Yiddishkeit is totally Yiddishkeit? Where's V'Haftal L'Rata Kamoicha? Where's that? Where's the Havas Yisrael? It doesn't sound. This is totally.
Okay, so like I said, let your question be resounding. Let your question remain rhetorical. In other words, we're not going to answer the question. But the idea, what the Rambam is saying, is that the Beis HaMikdash is not just any place. Any person wants, for example, their own home to be as beautiful as possible. Torah wants the Beis HaMikdash to be beautiful and perfect because it's the Eibishter's house, and it has to be beautiful and perfect even externally. In other words, the way I would answer is say is, we're not saying there's something wrong with the invalid. There's nothing wrong with the invalid.
No, we are.
No.
No, we are.
No, we're not saying.
We're
We're
not
saying
saying
that some mitzvahs have to be
by
beautiful.
our actions, we're implying that there's something wrong.
No.
We're not saying.
No.
Oh,
Not our actions.
We're
It's in the Torah.
We're implying.
God's actions. God's saying. Don't do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is the whole thing. The whole thing of Judaism is not this. It's totally the opposite of well, this one isn't.
God
This one
emphasizes
isn't.
external appearance, which is something God tells us not to.
Very good. And in the Beis HaMikdash, beauty has to be not only on the inside, but on the outside as well. Ki b'yeis ha'adam. That when a person is choshu b'mar'ehu, prominent in his external appearance, v'tayv ma'isa, and his good behavior, yimtzachein, he will find grace. V'seichel teiv, seichel teiv also means appeal. The cholash yasin, all that he does, the eni korev, and the eyes of those who will behold him. If the opposite will be true, pachos b'tzurasei, less in his external form, umishuna be'ivarav, of a deficient or disfigured with his limbs, and even if yasher b'drachav, he'll be good in his ways, la ye'aisu pu'uleisav kol kach elev royev. His deeds will not have the same appeal by those who perceive it. Al-Kain, therefore, be'emes in truth, Ra'i, it is appropriate. Li'yai said it should be. Just, no, don't turn the page. Just flip over the package. That Ashliach, the emissary, Sha'akapada Tluya love, on whom the atonement depends, Ish Chain, Yefeiteh Yefeiman, a man with appeal, who's beautiful in his physical, in his limb formations, and in the appearance, clustered upon him, Rashi says, in the appearance of his face, to have this appeal to people. Now, I apologize for doing this, but I get the last word. The point here is not Chas v'Sholem, the Eibush is saying external beauty is important. Not even Chas v'Sholem that we care about superficial people who are impressed by external beauty. But that the Eibush wants the Beis HaMikdash to be respected by everybody, including the external people. A person who's taka'achitz, a person with little substance, should also be impressed by the Beis HaMikdash. And one of the ways this is done is by making the Beis HaMikdash absolutely perfect. In other words, I'll give you a good illustration. A shtibel versus a beautiful Ashkenazi Beis HaKnesses. Everybody knows how a shtibel looks. Everybody knows how beautiful Ashkenazi Beis HaKnesses looks. And many people complain about the shtibel. There was recently a huge controversy. One of my students told me that there's a Rabbi Morse in Australia who reacted to a question that was asked, how come people talk in shul? And he wrote this whole discourse about the idea that talking in shul is a reflection of being comfortable in the shul. And he was lambasted. He was ripped to shreds by a number of reactionaries, a number of rabbis. The shtibel is beautiful. There's something very famous about the shtibel. But there is something to be said for a beautiful shul. The Beis HaMikdash couldn't afford to be a shtibel. We choose to daven in shtiblach. But pardon my honesty, 770 is supposed to be beautiful. 770 is not a shtibel. Hagam 770 is the shtibel of shtibels, but it should be beautiful, the chitzonius as well. And this idea manifests in each detail, including the people that people are going to be looking to. Okay? Question remains.
The analogy is not the same. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Fine. So we have a Rabbi like this. Rashi says it's pochus. If you can get a better person to do the job and a deficient person to do the job, and a person who's wounded, a person who is an invalid is considered pechashecha, it's not so honorable. In other words, you wouldn't hire, I guess maybe in America today you would, but some would say you wouldn't hire to be the waiter at a presidential dinner a person who limps, a person who's not pleasant to look at. In the Beis HaMikdash, you want people who are not chas. Now understand, it's not like I don't agree with your questions. I'm just showing you how the idea develops in them. Rambam says not the pshat. He has one crash. It's not like Hashem perceives the person as pochus. People will, and the Eivishter wants that his house and his servants should be beautiful, even to people who are that superficial.
There's a certain vein about that. I'll end with that.
Okay.
There's a certain vanity over there.
Now.
End of story.
Okay, fine. Now that we read two interpretations, we have now a Ramban. Well, the Rambam and the Chinuch are essentially the same. We're going to have now a Ramban and a Kliyokar. Kliyokar is an Achrein, and I've always avoided learning Achreinim. I'm the fact of the fact that I've never learned Kliyokar in my life. But Kliyokar, first of all, is quoted in Hasidus, which means that the Rabbeim consider. Go back to the beginning and turn one page. The Rabbeim consider the Kliyokar a sefer written with Ruach HaKodesh. In this particular case, it's page 295. I made 2 hours. In this particular case, the Kliyokar is gorgeous. It's very interesting. And it seems that the Kliyokar is in an enhanced form, a very, very long form of the Ramban. I printed many pages of the Chumash. And each page has one arrow, because the reason I printed all these pages is because I wanted to print the whole Kliyokar. The Kliyokar goes on for 5 pages. So in each page I arrowed, if you're interested in the Kliyokar, so you can read it from beginning to the end. Though we're not going to read the whole Kliyokar, and we're not going to read the whole Ramban, but I wanted to give you the information so we should all feel a little bit guilty. But let's begin with the Ramban. But ich bet euch, Lost me.
No interruption.
No, you can interrupt me when I'm finished. Wait till I'm done. The Rabban says a very interesting thing, but he has a kasha. What does it say on the first page? What does it say on the first page? Hashem says to Moshe, tell Aaron that he should tell his family that anybody who is about mum shouldn't live in the Beis HaMikdash. So the Ramban has a simple question. The lashon of the pasuk is David al Aaron Lema, speak to Aaron, tell him Ish Mizarach, any person amongst your children. Now what happens if Aaron himself is an invalid?
I wouldn't tell him that.
Ish Mizarach, one of your seed, one of your offspring who is an invalid, is unfit. What if Aaron is invalid? So the Ramban says something very powerful. But remember again, cage interruption still be finished. The Ramban says like this, David al-Aharein Ish Mizaracha, says the Ramban. Lo yamar bekan, it doesn't say David al-Aaron ve'albonos, speak to Aaron and his sons. Kasha yemer apashis kulan, as it typically would. Tell all the kohanim. It says, tell Aaron to tell his family. V'hatam, here's the reason. And we're going to skip a few lines. V'loi, last word on the line, 6 lines in. V'loi Yirtzeh, you see it? Hashem does not want lahazir es Aharon atzmei, to forewarn, to anticipate regarding Aharon himself, b'teiras hamumin, in regard to the blemishes which Aaron may have. Here comes the catch. Ki Aaron kadosh Hashem, Aaron, the Holy One of God, kula yafa mum loy yihiyah, is beautiful, and he will not be blemished. The Ramban says you can learn something from the language of the pasuk. Hashem says to Moshe, tell Aaron to tell his children. What about Aaron himself? A tzaddik like Aaron, Kadosh Hashem, will not have a blemish. What does that mean? What does that mean? And of course the Ramban goes on to articulate. He says like this, it means like this. Certainly, external beauty doesn't have much substance. The credibility of external beauty is inner beauty. But there's another way of looking at it. A person who is absolutely perfect on the inside will be beautiful on the outside as well. The Ramban says, Hashem doesn't say to Aaron, you or your children will be blemished, because people like Aaron don't get mumin. And I would like to digress. I believe personally, and I have a lot of rayas to it, beginning with this Ramban, that according to Torah, perfect people are perfect physically also. They're perfect, beautiful b'chitzayis. We all know that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't speak. Moshe Rabbeinu had terrible speech impediments. He didn't have small speech impediments. If Moshe Rabbeinu spoke, you didn't understand what he was saying. But he wasn't born that way. He was born perfect. Moshe Rabbeinu was meant to be speech impaired. The famous Drashas Haran gives a reason why Moshe was made this way, so that nobody should think that people listened to the Moshe because he was such a great orator, because he was a terrible orator. The credibility of Moshe was not how it sounded, but what he was saying. Chassidus says Moshe's inability to speak was because he was in a level of thought, and therefore spiritually he was above speech, so it physically manifested in his inability to speak. So he should have been born that way. No. A tzaddik gomor, or to be very narrow, a rebbe is born physically perfect because the spiritual wholesomeness of such individuals is such that it manifests also physically. Not only physically, it's not perception. If the Kedusha is so dominating, it spills out to the outside also. And I have an interesting Chabad commentary, and forgive me, don't give me a hard time. The Rebbe's Elta Zayda was the Tzemach Tzedek's oldest son. He was a very holy man and a very great man. Halachically, he had the right to the succession. And the Tzemach Tzedek told him not to be a Rebbe, and he told him to wait 4 generations, and he promised him a double measure. Here's what you don't know. Now, Baruch Shalom didn't have a hand. He was an invalid. In fact, he didn't have a hand. His left hand ended in a stump. Right before the Alter Rebbe passed away, the Alter Rebbe called him the Tzemach Tzedek, And he asked him, he was 23 years old at the time, do you have any questions in halacha that you need to resolve? And the Tzemach Tzedek said he didn't have any. When it came time for the Baruch Shalom's bar mitzvah, the Tzemach Tzedek said, this is what the Zayda meant. Don't shoot me for saying this, but I believe that a chitzoni is the kamu by a tzaddik of this madregeh. He says, if the tzaddik is perfect, the perfection will be even the gashmias. Now, does that mean that every kohen is perfect spiritually? That's not what it means. But there is something to be said that since in principle, ideal inner beauty manifests in external beauty, to expect every kohen to be beautiful on the inside is unrealistic. But if a kohen is physically imperfect, we know for sure that they're spiritually imperfect. Now, spiritually imperfect is not his fault. I mean, you can't expect every person to be a kohen. It's totally unrealistic. But since it is true that if they were spiritually perfect, Speish Hashem, they would be Kula Yafa, Mumen Bright, they would be perfect also physically. The Eibusha says a person who's a Baal Mum, don't let him be a kohen. We're not going to take every kohen. The Kliyaka talks at length. Does that mean if a person has inner blemishes, you should go to every kohen and examine his soul and see if he has an inner blemish, that there's a possibility that he can become an invalid, you should discredit him? You don't do that. You don't go look into people's psyche and say, oh, you're not perfect. Maybe tomorrow you're going to break a leg. We're not going to do that later. But the opposite, we say. Since external beauty does reflect the most perfect level of spiritual beauty, if a person has a physical blemish, we don't let him do the Avodah. Again, it's not blaming the person, but it's still not the Madrega Aron HaKoyin. Now, everybody knows that most Koyanim who are not blemished aren't Aron HaKoyin either. But you don't have to go looking for it unless it, so to speak, strikes you. It meets you. I think this is even an Edelere Havoneh, a finer pshat. You could still retain your objection and your frustration. What do you mean? What did the person do? He was born missing a hand. By the way, what I wanted to say, this is perhaps one of the reasons he was not a Rebbe. I'm not saying that this is the only reason. It was the Baruch Shalom. It's a Machtzedek's Bchor. The Rebbe is Zayda.
The oldest.
Right. Okay, so the idea is certainly certainly an external wound does not make a person bad, but no external wounds can reflect a greater wholesomeness. Now the Kliyakar, I think the Kliyakar is enhancing the Rambam. You could say that the Kliyakar is saying a different shot, and I would have no trouble. In other words, if you would like to say the Kliyakar is saying something different than the Rambam, that's fine. But the Kliyakar says like this. I think that's a very interesting observation. If you look at the Parsha, yeah, the Kliyakar, you know what I'll say with you? Instead of reading the Kliyakar, I'll show you the Kliyakar's observation in the Chumash. Okay? So turn back to the first page, which is page 294. It says, David al-Aaron Lema, speak to Aaron as follows. And Lema doesn't mean as follows. Lema means that he should repeat to others. Ish mizaracha, any one of his children, or the nation for all generations, asher yihi yaboy mum, that will have in him a blemish. Okay? Next pasuk, Yud Ches. To call ish asher boy mum, any person who has in him a blemish, and he proceeds to articulate a variety of different disfigurations and ailments and so on the like. Okay? Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Call ish asher boy mum, any person who has in him a blemish. Okay? Continue looking at Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Call ish asher boy mum, any person who has in him a blemish. Mizera Aaron, from the seed, from the descendants of Aaron HaKoyin, Lo Yigash should not come close, lahakif, to offer up as Ishi Hashem, the fire of God. Mumboy, there's a blemish in him. Eislechem alakav, the bread of alakav, his God, Lo Yigash lahakif, he shouldn't sacrifice. So that the Kliyaka feels like this. 3 or 4 times the prophet says the words, Boy mum, he has a blemish. At the conclusion it says, it repeats itself again in Pasuk Chav Gimel, Ki Mum Boy. You know why a person with a blemish should do in the Beis HaMikdash? Because he has a blemish. Now what does that mean? A person with a blemish, Boy Mum, in him is a blemish, shouldn't do the Avodah, Ki Mum Boy, because the blemish is in him. That's rhetoric. That's rhetoric. If a person is crippled, he shouldn't do the Avodah because he's crippled. What does that mean? So the Kliyaka teaches a person who has a mum shouldn't do the Avodah because mumbai. If there's an external blemish, it's a symptom of an internal blemish. Now, the internal blemishes of an invalid are internal blemishes for people like Aaron HaKohen. And the other Kohen up the street and on the next block may have larger internal blemishes. But in any Kohen, that the internal blemish was allowed to manifest in a physical blemish, Torah says don't let him do the Avodah in Beis HaMikdash. This is what the Kliyaka is saying. And I believe that it's an enhancement of the Ramban. Okay? Now, we get the Chassidus if there's any I don't want to break your heart. So, before we get to Chassidus, let me summarize what we did. We did 5 commentaries, okay, and you can all do this for homework. We have Rashi, then we have a Rambam and a Chinuch, and then we have a Ramban and a Kliyaka. Now we get to Chassidus. And like always, Chassidus just makes it turn to gold. We have a whole minor from Tzemach Tzedek, and complete minor, which discusses this very question. Why is an invalid unqualified to in the Beis HaMikdash? I don't have time to do the whole minor, so if you don't mind, go to the very, very last page of the package. I made you an arrow, so you don't have to read the whole minor either. You can just get lazy and read the last page, but of course, some people are going to do the whole minor, right? Of course. Huh? Of course. And before I tell you the Hasidic Pshat, and we do have time restraints, before I tell you the Hasidic Pshat, I would like to give you an introduction. There are 2 types of Jews, a tzaddik and a baal tshuva. A tzaddik is, in quotes, perfect. Perfect means to say, philosophically, his personality is contained by his mind. You know, the mind is rational and reasonable, we hope. The tzaddik never steps away from the control and the vision and the clarity and the objectivity that the mind provides. In other words, there's a beauty about a tzaddik. There's a wholesomeness about a tzaddik. And there's a simplicity, there's almost a naivete about a tzaddik. Why? Because he's not scared. He's not all over the place. He's not fixing problems. He doesn't have any. It didn't come easy to him. He worked very, very hard. But the fact of the matter is, a tzaddik is a model, is a type of person. He's the type of person whose struggles are inner, not outer. Tzaddikim are growing. Tzaddikim have problems. Tzaddikim have to overcome those problems. But tzaddikim don't overcome their problems by trial and error. Tzaddikim overcome their problems by mind over matter. They analyze, they study, they understand, and then they impose the will of their mind on their heart and on their lives. Baal tshuva is everything I just said about the tzaddik backwards. He's not attractive. He's not beautiful spiritually. He is scattered. He's all over the place. And he spends his entire life trying to gain a focus. The Baal tshuva has a certain hysteria about his person. Baalei tshuva are not governed by their minds. They're not. Because they've abandoned their minds. But Baalei tshuva more than compensate. That means they're better than tzaddikim with their will or their emotions. Because the Baal tshuva is a person, he's not whole, and he's really never going to be the tzaddik. It's a different kind of personality. Once a person has become a non-tzaddik, it's a virtual impossibility to become a tzaddik. But the Baal tshuva can actually achieve more than the tzaddik. But the Baal Tshuva's effort is not in trying to be beautiful. It's trying to connect. And therefore, let's put it this way, the tzaddik stays within himself. And there's beauty to it. The Baal Tshuva can't afford to worry about beauty, but he goes out of himself. Who's better? There are two systems. There are two priorities. The Eibishter likes this, and the Eibishter likes that. We don't get to choose. Most of us didn't choose to be tzaddikim about each other. The Eibishter has different expectations for different types of people. But there is the inner system, and there's the inner system is defined by its beauty and its order and its exactness. If you will, it's lechatchila. It's the way it should be. The Baal Tshuva is, it's not the way it should be, but I'm going to compensate for it. There are two systems. I can give you many examples for this. One example for this, and this is discussed in my Mori Chasidus, you have it in the Maimon of Sukkot Ayin Tes, and also Maimon Shamoch Beis, from the Rebbe Rashad. The difference between Kippur and Purim. The Tikkunei Zohar equates Yom Kippur with Purim. They're both one day. They both revolve around a lottery. Yom Kippur revolves around the lottery. Purim revolves around the lottery. They're both very intense, but diametrically opposed. Yom Kippur's intensity is defined by its absolute control. Purim's intensity is defined by its hysteria. They're going out of all limitations. So it says in the Maimonides, Purim is greater than Yom Kippur. But Purim is outside the box. Purim is not in the basement. You can't act that way in the basement because you wouldn't last 5 minutes. And they wouldn't have a posse to shoot you. You wouldn't last 5 minutes. The Beis HaMikdash is a very controlled environment. Mesiras Nefesh, Yechida, the greatest level of intensity in the house of God has to be done by the greatest person on the greatest day with such care and such concentration and such exactness. There's no eating. They didn't let the Kohen Gadol go to sleep the night in Kippur. You know that? They didn't let him sleep the whole night. They were afraid. Who knows what's going to happen if he goes to bed? They kept him up because the Beis HaMikdash Yechida is a beautiful Yechida. The Purim Yechida is a hysterical Yechida. Now I'll give you a different example. The Beis HaMikdash do a Karbonis. Karbonis have 1,001 rules. We know why Karbonis were brought. We know by whom Karbonis were brought. We know who offered the Karbonis up. We know all the many limitations about how long you have to eat it and how long you have to do this and how pure you have to do. There are all kinds of very rigid rules that govern the preciseness of a carbon. We don't have Karbonis, right? So we compensate for Karbonis by praying. The Kohen Gadol did the services in Kippur once a year. We do it every day. We say Ezel Mekoyma, we say Par, V'Soy, Shayei Marakipurim. Every single morning we say the cow and the goat of the Kippur was done such and such. And the Chazal tell us, if you study the laws of Karbonis, Ilu Hikriv, right? It's as though you have sacrificed the Karbonis. In other words, every Jew can bring the avoid the Kohen Gadol Carbon of Yom Kippur on a daily basis. You know what else? You can do it in the middle of the night. A woman can do it. You don't have to go to the mikveh. You don't have to be pure. Of course, you have to be theistic, but you can do what requires so much precision and so much exactness and so much control without any precision, or virtually any precision, and virtually any control, virtually any limitations, by reading a book. Which is better? It's inside the box or outside the box. There's beauty in the Beis HaMikdash. Our tefillas don't have the exactness and the beauty that the Beis HaMikdash had. Perhaps we more than compensate. Perhaps our tefillas are better than. I mean, there's many proofs to the effect that the tefillas can achieve more than the Karbonis achieved. But it's a different system. There's an inside system and an outside system. And the Eibishter wants both. The Eibishter wants the tzaddik system. The tzaddik system is represented by the Beis HaMikdash. It's represented by Yom Kippur. The Eibishter wants the Baal Tshuva system. It's represented by prayer and it's represented by Purim. Okay? With this background, now let us see what Chassidus has to say about a Baal Mum. What Chassidus say about a person who's an invalid, God forbid, not by his own choice. What does Kabbalah and Chassidus add to the equation. A simple thing. About 450 years ago, there was a man named Rav Meir ben Gabai. Rav Meir ben Gabai. He wrote a classic work of Kabbalah, Chakira, called Avodah. This sefer is quoted very frequently in Chassidus. One of the familiar quotes brought from this sefer in Chassidus is this question. Avodah, Tzorech, Gavoya, question mark. Our service to God, does it benefit God, or does it only benefit us? Yiddishkeit is for Hashem too, or Hashem doesn't care, Yiddishkeit is only for us. And I must tell you, of course, this is discussed in many Sifrei Mussar, many Sifrei Machzor, many theological works of Judaism address this question. But for the most part, there's a very, very clear split. Because there are two categories of Jewish theologians, the Kabbalists and the philosophers. Rambam was a philosopher. The philosophers always will take the position, Hashem doesn't care. You do David a favor. David needs your mitzvahs. Imras Hashem tzrufa, the words of God tzrufa, heal us. Omar Rav, v'yitnu ha-mitzvahs ella, there wouldn't be any mitzvahs. Only l'tzared b'hemet sabir, it's meant to make people perfect. Hashem doesn't need your mitzvahs. Mitzvahs of the people. Rambam, as the philosopher, who says mitzvahs of the people, gave us the explanation he gave us, which is, people's perception matters, because mitzvahs were designed for people's perception. Kabbalah adds a fundamental building block to Jewish theology and changes it radically. And that is, we were created in God's image. What does God look like? In philosophy, the image of God is a huge dilemma. What does it mean, the image of God? And Rambam writes the image of God means two things: intelligence and free will. But in Kabbalah, the image of God means far more. In Kabbalah it says that before Hashem created the world, He created Adam HaElyon, the supernal man, a mystical realm where godliness manifests in a form. And that in fact, the 248 mitzvahs correspond to the 248 limbs of the supernal body. We have 248 limbs because in Atzilut there are 248 limbs. This is why the Gemara says, Chos b'reishei, Yashik b'teira. If a headache, learn Teira. How come you studied Teira and your headache didn't go away? Because you didn't study that part of Teira connected to the head. Chos b'zrayai, Yashik b'teira. Your hand hurts. Study Teira. You study Teira, your hand doesn't stop hurting. You didn't know the idea. The Rebbe says once, learn. Maybe you'll be Zaycha. You'll find the right chelik in Teira, you'll heal. There's a sefer called Charedim, I spoke about this a number of times already, who shows you of several hundred mitzvahs which limb each mitzvah corresponds to. A person has a physical ailment, it reflects a spiritual ailment. Kabbalistically, each limb parallels one mitzvah. Find that mitzvah, correct it, the physical ailment will depart. Because according to Kabbalah, what manifests here reflects what's happening on high. Our bodies reflect the tefillas. Our bodies are in the image of a lakus. Now don't forget, if anybody thinks Hashem has the appearance of a man, he's a crazy bitch. It's heresy. Hashem is Ein Sof, Pasuk Taksab Shitus, Einay Tchila, Bilti Metzias Nimtzah. You'll figure out what those things mean for homework. But He manifests in our tefillas. Hashem wants us to have a relationship with Him. And in order for this, He made a model, and then He modeled us in that model, so there can be a connection between Him and us. Now, I want to answer a question of the secular people. For those of you who are familiar with the theory of evolution, you know that the evolutionists have proof for evolution. Some of the proof is supposedly scientific, clinical, based on the discovery of fossils. But then they have philosophical proof. The philosophical underpinning of evolution is the relatedness of species. They look at all biological matter and they see unbelievable similarity. All living things have the same, made up of the same materials, they're designed in the same way. Now, if there's a God, why should each one be the same? They should be different. The fact that there's a uniformity is a sign that we have a common ancestor. You should know what's going to bring the theory of evolution down is this obsession with the common ancestor. But one of the more immediate arguments is every mammal, any animal that's warm-blooded and nurses its young, and whatever other characteristics are, has exactly the same physical characteristics, exactly the same. 5 fingers with 3 digits on the first 2 digits on the last, on the thumb. The same number of toes, the same number of digits in each toe. Every single piece of plumbing is identical. It's only that they fuse. The bones fuse, they glue together. You'll take apart a horse, you'll see the same number of bones. But they've been fused into 2 toes, or 4 toes, or 3 toes. The biological fact is all mammals have exactly the same. In fact, a panda has 6 fingers. You know that? Panda has 6 fingers. 5 fingers and an opposable. It's called the metatarsal bone. It's this bone. I don't want to argue with you, but it's a fact. There's an unbelievable every single mammal is makes the same plumbing. So the evolutionists say we all come from one tiny little rodent that was running away from the dinosaurs. Now, what does Peter have to say about that? You better believe it, we come from one model. But the model is not a 35 million year old rodent. It's Adam Aryan. Everything is created in the divine image. But animals are disfigured. They're bent over. Man was created in the divine image and continues to reflect the divine image. The reason all creations have a uniformity of form is because we come from one form. Everything was created in the image of the Teda. Teda, Zesha, Teda, Adam. What distinguishes man from all other creations is that we still mirror Adam Ha'elyon. What's the basic insight? The mind is above the heart and therefore controls it. The heart is above the lower third of the body and therefore controls it, while animals are horizontal. The mind is not higher than the heart, cannot dominate it. The heart is not higher than the behind, basically. So the reason there's such uniformity is because we come from one model, but not a physical model, a mystical model. The uniqueness of Adam is that we continue to mirror. We have the capacity to be like Adam Elyon, while all the creations, the fancy word is, they're klippah. They've been disfigured, they've been mangled, twisted. For those of you who know the fine language of Chassidus, they've passed through a parsa that's disfigured them, that's distorted them. Adam hasn't passed through a parsa, just a tzimtzum. Now, what about an invalid? He's human, he's Adam, but there's a deficiency in the mirroring. The Adam HaTachton, the physical man, is not a perfect copy of the Adam Elyon. Is it his fault? No. Is it his problem? No. Why did God do it? Why did God do it? Right? Because the Eibishter has 2 designs for Adam. The inner design and the outer design. The person who's perfect and is expected to achieve perfection trapped in the perfect body. And the perfect who's emphatically not perfect. And he is never going to be perfect. But he can be better than perfect, but outside of the box, not within the model. Like the difference between the tzaddik, the Baal Tshuva, the difference between Purim, or Yom Kippur and Purim, the difference between a korban and a prayer. There's nothing wrong with a Baal Mum. The Eibishter doesn't want him in the Beis HaMikdash because he has a different Avodah. A person who's chas v'shalom physically invalid, there's nothing wrong with him. But the Eibishter didn't make him invalid to make him suffer. The Eibishter didn't make him invalid to make him deficient. He has a different expectation. That expectation is special. It may be more special, but it's not what the Beis HaMikdash is about. It's about what Golus is about. It's what Baal Tshuva is. It's outside the Beis HaMikdash. It could be greater than the Beis HaMikdash, but it's outside.
So what is that?
It's the avodah of overcompensating. The Eibishter gives you a test, and instead of being breigers at him, you overcome the test. The Beis HaMikdash is not about the test. It's about beauty. One is not better than the other. There are 2 paths to God. And the Eibishter designed both. And the whole Chassidus, and even the Rambam Paskins like this, that we say the Baal Tshuva is better than the Tzaddik. But it's not equal. It's not the same. There are 2 different types of Yiddishkeit. Golus and Geula. Beis HaMikdash and Golus. The 2 forms of serving Hashem. Which is better? Let me ask you a question. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they did 613 mitzvahs. How many do we do? A lot less than half. Yeah, you know what it's like? It's like the Havdil. There's crabs. Crabs, they have huge left claw, and the left claw is designed simply for display. It's this huge. It's like an animal that weighs 20 pounds, and 10 pounds of it is the hammer, and it's used. Can you imagine a person who had gigantic forearms and tiny legs, a very well-developed heart, and there's no balance. We do certain mitzvahs. We don't do any more. So certain of our spiritual limbs are very overdeveloped or very well-developed. The rest of us are sick. We never brought a korban. We never brought truma. We never brought meiser. We never ate a korban. If every mitzvah I do strengthens one part of my body, there are pieces of me that are very healthy and pieces of me that are very sick. That's not fair. Every Yid in Golos is an invalid. We don't have all the mitzvahs. Chiach is going to come, it says in the Siddur, and it's discussed at length in Hasidus. Judaism has never been done perfectly. You mean to tell me Jews sat 2,000 years in Golos, were martyred in the millions, and that's not committed to Tzedakah? That's not ideal? You better believe it's ideal. It's a different ideal. There's the inner model and the outer model. The Kohen is the Balmum. The way the Rebbe explained, the Rebbe uses Kabbalistic language. He uses the form of ma'uban. He says there are things that are inherently perfect and things that need to be corrected. Something that needs to be corrected, if and when it is corrected, is better than something that's initially perfect. But initially perfect is initially perfect, and corrected is corrected. The Balmum is like the Balchuvah. The Balmum is like the person who's doing Birudim. He's elevating the Klippa sparks. When he achieves that, he goes higher than the Tzaddik. But he's not Tzaddik. It's different. The Beis HaMikdash was one type of Yiddishkeit. It was Ma Be'etzem, to use the correct language. It was designed to be a place where godliness does not struggle. But Yiddishkeit is not the Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMikdash is part of Yiddishkeit. It's like saying, Yom Kippur is not the whole Yiddishkeit. There's a Purim. Korban is not the whole Yiddishkeit. There's a Siddur. But in the Beis HaMikdash, things have to be perfectly modeled after Adam HaElyon, because there's an assumption. Not that the Beis HaMikdash had already been corrected. The Beis HaMikdash was never compromised. And it manifests down to the minutiae, the Kohen is a Balmum. That means the Eidish expects from him a different Avodah. And I don't think you have a problem with that.
No, absolutely not.
So when you learn all those pshatim, and then you learn Hasidus, that's when, aha! It's an undermining.